We'll be going over all the different components that you want to consider when you're starting up a worker cooperative or even in the considering idea stage. My name is Matt Feinstein. I am the program manager of the Co-op Clinic, which is a program of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. The Co-op Clinic does a lot of technical assistance work, meaning we support cooperatives that are looking for a specific project from a consultant or a peer advisor. We have peer advisor models where people who have actually been in worker cooperatives and now are very experienced in a certain area are available to support other worker co-ops and in their startup phase or conversion phase. So we can pair up people and get that expertise shared across our movement. So that's the main project in the Co-op Clinic. We also do regular webinars and teaching opportunities and spaces to connect with each other as well. Everyone who's here today is eligible to have a free 30-minute consultation with the Co-op Clinic to ask your specific questions, to get resources that are specific to your situation. So if you're interested in that after this, go to the usworker.coop website and request it right there and give us a little sense of, you fill out a short form and tell us what you're up to and what your team is like and what phase you're at and what you're looking for, and we set up a call. So it's just one of the programs of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops that is the main advocacy and organizing group for worker co-ops in the U.S. So please, in the chat, if you could share who you are, where you are, what's your location, what you're working on in a brief phrase, if you have a co-op or a co-op idea, share that, and then what you're looking for out of this workshop. So go ahead and share that in the chat as we let the last few people trickle in. Yeah, so go ahead and share a little blurb, your location, what you're working on, and what you're looking for. And in the meantime, I will be going over a little bit about co-ops in general, sort of the basics of cooperatives. So co-ops exist to meet the needs of their members, right? And that can take many forms. That can take consumers that are looking for natural foods, for example, in their area and having trouble finding affordable natural foods, and they start a consumer cooperative together. So that's one kind of classification of cooperatives, consumer cooperatives. And they buy things together and they get better prices. And so it's owned by the consumer member owners in that case. There are producer cooperatives where people come together for selling and marketing together. So there are large producer cooperatives across the US, Ocean Spray, a lot of in the agricultural arena. Multiple sectors come together for producer cooperatives. So that selling and joint marketing is a big sector of cooperatives. And then there are worker cooperatives where people are working together that share a business and are the worker owners of the business. And we're going to be focusing on worker cooperatives. There are also multi-stakeholder cooperatives that mix up or have multiple classes of membership. So they have members that could be consumer members and worker members. There are several grocery stores, for example, that mix those membership classes. Though today we'll be focused mostly on co-ops that just have worker member owners. And so there are also many reasons that people come together to start a cooperative. And some people come together to create good jobs, fair pay, good work for their community, for themselves and their community. That can be a primary motivation, but often have a broader goal for their community and different kinds of jobs that have real job security, right? So a good worker co-op can tackle all four of these, but some might be emphasized more than others when you get started. Some might be really focused on, good wages, and then and have the community component grow as the cooperative grows. Some may really be focused on the community component and then be able to grow the wages for their worker owners as they go too. But it's good to consider all of these benefits of a worker cooperative. And the main component of worker ownership when we're talking about worker cooperatives, it's both the ownership, the financial benefit. People who are investing funds into this and are member owners are reaping the financial benefits of the cooperative. When it does well, there's profit sharing, there's compensation for the upside of those cooperative businesses, and there's decision-making power. Right, so having both of these is key to full worker cooperatives. But there are other aspects of of the democratic workplace arena that may have one. So staff-directed nonprofits, for example, may have very democratic structures and run as a democratic workplace, but they're not exactly jointly owned. The ownership is more in the public benefit as a nonprofit. Or you could have an employee stock ownership plan that's employee owned. You could have an employee owned company or an ESOP, and that has the ownership component, but maybe they don't have the democratic workplace. Maybe the employees don't have member owner kind of governance roles. They can't elect the board of directors, or they can't have management say, for example. So, but in worker cooperatives, you have both of these. You have the financial benefit, there's the joint ownership, and there's the democratic decision-making in the workplace. So not to dive too quickly into the complicated structures, but to just give you a sense, in a worker cooperative, there are benefits, tax benefits and reinvestment benefits. So this is basically how the money flows in a worker cooperative that's using internal capital accounts, which is, it's again, not to get you overwhelmed, but this is how you can have surplus, what we call surplus in a cooperative, which is the profit generated by the members. You have that and you're able to reinvest it. So anything that's generated by non-members, say you have people that are in membership that are yet to complete their membership track, that is considered profit, and it goes into your collective account and you pay corporate taxes on that. But then there's all the surplus that's generated by the members, right? That can go, then it's divided into you can put some of it into your collective account, and some of it can go into your member patronage. Some co-ops split this 50-50, some have other splits that they do. But basically you have this mechanism where you can allocate the surplus or profit to the individuals who did the work to make it happen, but you can reinvest parts of it into the cooperative and not be taxed twice. And so the IRS has this subchapter T for cooperatives, where you can have this reinvestment mechanism, make your balance sheet look really good, but have these the surplus allocated to the members, so that when they leave or when the co-op is able to pay them out, they can pay them out. And people can build wealth and retirement kind of funds or things like that inside the cooperative. So you can see how it can go up each year that there's some surplus allocated, and some of it goes out as cash, so you can pay the taxes. Not to get overwhelmed, you don't need to know the details of all of this. There are plenty of accountants and attorneys that can help you set up these systems, but just to know that that mechanism exists for worker co-ops, and it's a great benefit. But to tell you a little bit more about the worker cooperative movement, there's about 700 or 800 worker co-ops in the US. And it's hard to get an exact number. We've verified 465 of them in our last census, but the number is definitely growing. and there are also hundreds in the idea startup phase, maybe like yourselves. Um, and so it's a growing movement. It's definitely been growing, um, especially recently. Um, there's a lot of interest, and a lot of these cooperatives are small, but there are a few that have really gone to scale, with over 1,000 members. Uh, so again, the goals of the worker cooperative approach, are to have democracy in your workplace. Um, so this is sharing decisions. This is making decisions together in an empowered way, in the workplace, in the governance decisions especially. So that means electing a board if you have a board, or making decisions on a collective basis. Um, and it's also about sharing any surplus that's generated, right? Having an equitable way to share the wealth that's generated by the cooperative. Um, and it's also about having community in mind. These are key principles of cooperatives, to include the needs of your community into your business model. So worker co-ops have all three of these components in some way, shape, or form, but some, again, may emphasize one area before the other in early stages. Um, and some may be stronger at some than others, but it's important to keep all of these in mind as we go. So successful co-ops have the democ democracy in the workplace. The people are organized in their workplace in a democratic way. Um, the people who run the business share the profits in an equitable way. So there's shared ownership and profit sharing, and there's benefits to the community. So all three of those things. So let me give an example, maybe. Um, a food waste collection cooperative in Boston called Zero started both with the goals for their members, their BIPOC members. As they started, they wanted dignified jobs for folks in Boston that were looking for job security and good work that they could control. But they also had the community and climate justice in mind as they started a composting collection cooperative. So just as Boston was starting to require more restaurants to do composting, and more individuals were interested in composting, they got all the equipment to do collection for a composting operation, and have a successful cooperative that is democratic, that shares the profits equitably amongst the worker owners, and it benefits the community in having high quality compost collection um, happen. So that's an example. And the whole community came together to make that happen. There was a lot of joint fundraising that happened. A lot of longtime community organizers got behind the environmental components of that, and the worker justice components of that worker co-op. So conversions are another way to form a cooperative. That's an existing business that's converting into a cooperative. And we like to use the metaphor of metamorphosis, right? Coming from the caterpillar into a cocoon where things get messy in there, right? There's some really fundamental change that happens inside the cocoon. But it's an emergent process, and a beautiful butterfly can result. But fundamental changes that happen in that process. So moving from a corporation or a sole proprietor kind of situation, one owner, or a corporate ownership structure, into a worker cooperative, um, is that process of conversion takes a lot of intention on the culture side, and on the sale of the business for something that makes sense for the workers, and for the retiring business owner, or for the business owner that wants to stay in. So those are the two main kind of conversions we see: an owner that wants to stay in and grow, but not be the sole owner going forward. So they're really willing to share that ownership. or a retiring business owner that is looking for succession and to maintain certain aspects of the mission of the company, um, but is willing to really do a culture shift to joint ownership. So those are conversions, and a very common way for cooperatives to start. We won't be focusing on that so much today. We'll be focusing more on the startup, but there's a lot of commonalities, so um, and a lot of overlaps. So now we're going to start thinking about your team as you're assembling your team here. Um, there tend to be people who kind of fall into one of these three areas, right? There's folks who are good at building the capacity, right? They think about the culture of your group. They think about framework and decision making kind of processes and things like that. There are folks who focus on the business development. They may have more entrepreneurial backgrounds or interests. Um, and then there are also ecosystem development people, the networkers in your group, right? Folks who are out there sitting on coalition tables or reaching out to find resources that fit your cooperative. So think about who could those be in your team, and if you're just one person, who might you want to bring in to fill out those roles in your team. We'll be going into a lot more of this. So to dive into the first one, co-op capacity a little bit more. Um, this is someone who really thinks about these team dynamics, right? How do we create a shared vision as we get going with this cooperative project? Who's a member in our co-op and who's not? Who needs to have membership stake in our cooperative, and who might be involved in different ways? How do we delegate work as it comes up, and how do we hold each other accountable when we delegate that work? So there's a lot to do in that arena in the early stages, especially this co-op capacity arena. Someone who's good at facilitating group dynamics is key to have in your group. This person can really help the group create that shared vision, right? Moving past one person with their sole idea, their genius idea, into something that can be a shared group vision. People, each of your members have something to contribute in that founding steering committee or group. And finding ways to learn together, right? There may be some people in your group that know a lot about cooperatives or a lot about business, and others that are really new to these ideas. So how do you find the mechanisms for folks to learn more? We run these webinars monthly, so if you have other people in mind that this would be useful for, this is, that's a good example of this team building. Oh, okay, this person might be interested in this startup webinar this month, and these resources that we found are really good for joint learning. Setting up those times to do it, making it engaging and interesting, making sure that the meetings happen regularly. So it's a really good practice to set your regular meetings and to have an agenda set ahead of time. So another example here is Future Focus Media Co-op. It's I'm a worker owner of this media co-op, and as we started, it was 4 of us who were already doing independent filmmaking and community video projects, and we came together and had to really get to know each other and share the vision. And we came up with a new vision together about youth training. So we did a lot of youth training. Every summer we run a youth training institute and engage the youth that have gone through that. And another example, Riquezas del Campo, is a farm cooperative in Western Massachusetts. They found each other through a worker center. They were fighting on the front lines against wage theft and for worker justice. And they said, okay, we want to build our own company in something we really love to do, and that's growing vegetables. So they came together and formed a cooperative to do that work. So it's really about facilitating that shared visioning work. And then this person can really help the group think about what it means to be a member, setting the clear expectations. This is what it means to be a founder member, and then when we're up and running, this is what it means to be a member owner of the business. And building in what the rights and responsibilities of each member. who's in the co-op, who's thinking about joining, what does it take to join the co-op. Once you're in, what are your responsibilities for joint governing of the cooperative? Uh, are there, is everyone on the board and jointly governing it? Or are some people able to just be members and a few times a year vote on board members and have different tiers of, you can set all that up in early stages, right? And it's important at this point to really ask for real contributions, people to financially contribute, to contribute their time, and really make a commitment to make this joint enterprise happen. And then it's really important to learn to figure out ways to share the work, right? So delegating, this person especially in this first category might be good at delegating the work. You know, not letting one person do all the work. They notice those dynamics happening, and they figure out ways to share the work and to make it delegate more successfully. And finding what, you know, people want to take on and have the skills to take on, or are willing to build the skills to take on. And so thinking about how each person can contribute. Um, and and there might be aspects that are not so familiar, and there might be aspects that are hard for everyone in the group, and some people have to learn them and take them on. So distributing those harder tasks as well. Feel free to put any questions in the chat as they go. If they're relevant to everyone, I'll try to address them now. If not, we'll have discussion at the end. But start thinking about your team, like who's in your team already, or who you're thinking of bringing onto your team. What roles do they play? What roles do you have, and what do you want complemented? So another thing in this first category is accountability. It's a really important component, right? People take on tasks and make sure that they have a certain, you know, have a due date for the tasks, and that there's a check-in process for those due dates, right? So have a running list that comes up in your standard agenda. Who took on what? Did they do it? If not, figure out why they didn't do the tasks, not just shaming someone for not doing a task, but figuring out, do they need more information? Do they need more time? Do we need to give more time for this? Are there other reasons that are coming up? And then celebrate the accomplishments when you do get things done. So again, this first person can really build these team dynamics, and that is so key for a successful early phase. And I see a question about how many founder members. So best practice is at least 3. Usually 3 or more members. There's exceptions to that. There are co-ops that have started with 2, but 3 is a good rule at least. And your founding group, they found that that works up to about 15. So your steering kind of founding member between 3 and 15 is kind of the ideal range. It depends how much how much you're trying to bite off with your project, your co-op, how many you need, what kind of dynamics and trust you already have. Maybe 10 is too many to start. You need to build up that trust slower with a group of 5 to 8 to 10. But that's usually the range we've seen be successful for worker cooperatives. Again, if you have consumer members involved, you may want to have 100 of those. But again, you'd still have a steering committee and a worker member. So let's give an example of accountability, right? We have Llama Pepper Farm Co-op. They started and they were just excited to grow their peppers and to have their llamas around. And they had some great, exciting meetings, but all they talked about was, what kind of peppers. And they had pretty unclear roles in their co-op. Everyone was doing a little bit of everything. A lot of important tasks like how to sell the peppers were dropped until it was too late, and there was all this scrambling. So they took a step back and they said, okay, we need some accountability and some better systems in our cooperative. So they set up work plans, they set up evaluations, how they would do peer evaluations as they got going with their growing and their actual work and compensating themselves for their work. Then, and so they had good systems of accountability. They had task lists and evaluations and work plans and things people had their clear roles. And then they set up even better systems going forward in the next 6 months. They set up grievance procedures, and they figured out how to suspend a member owner that wasn't pulling their weight or having issues that threatened the success of the co-op. And they figured out what better ways to have mentorship and and to track all the detailed tasks that came up in the cooperative. And they built some great systems, and they grew some great peppers and had some really funny looking mamas. Um, so that was a made up example, but it is a common practice for groups to dive in and then to need to figure out those processes. But as early as you can set up some of those practices of accountability, the better. Um, uh, so that's co-op capacity development, right? That's that first component with building a shared vision. That might be you. If you're the person that's here first and you're thinking about building the team, that might be your tasks. There's a question about finding other people to build out your team. Um, you know, a lot of people find folks through existing social networks uh, in your area. You can find them through, you know, Facebook groups of a topic area that's related to your business idea. Um, there are ways, if your scope is more national, to engage with the federation. We have peer councils that work on specific areas, and you can find people that way. We have a joint Slack uh, workspace where you can ask questions and find people that way. There are other communities. If what you're doing is intentional community cooperative, for example, there's networks and listings and directories of those kind of things. So look for other engagement, social networks, things like that. Um, yeah, and power sharing is key, especially in this first component. So I will address that now. It's not just how much task, you know, the task distribution, but it's also the power and knowledge, right? So it's really sharing the knowledge. As you know, one person might be diving more into understanding, you know, cooperatives more. So having the intention to share that knowledge back is key to power sharing as well. And decision making, having an intention of who's making what kind of decisions. Um, and having processes. So deciding early on, what is your decision making process? Are you attempting for consensus and falling back to a vote? Are you using majority vote system? And if so, how do you really get those minority voices, or the quieter voices in your group, to have equal say as much as possible? Um, and so knowledge sharing is key to that, uh, and clear decision making processes, not just defaulting to the loudest voices, not replicating the systems of oppression, being really intentional about anti-racist practices in your cooperative as you bring new people on, as you orient new people to your work. Those are key, and gender dynamics and all the systems of oppression that we might be replicating as we do this work. We have to be really intentional about working against those. And there's some great resources we'll share. Um, aorta.coop has some great resources around facilitating those power dynamics. Now the second area that I wanted to dive into is the business development. This might be the person in your team who's started a business before, or has taken business classes, or has access to friends and folks who can give them business level feedback, or who knows how to find the right advisors on the business plan and the financial projections and those kind of things. So this person is thinking about great value for the customers, thinking about the legal form that fits, thinking about how to raise the capital, and how the management structure should look like. So this person will be diving into a little bit more of those processes, but again, this is the business mind in your group. So often when we start a co-op, we're really excited about the product we're developing because we have a certain passion for it, and that's really important, right? This is something that we want for ourselves. We know, indirectly, that the community wants it because we want it. But you really need to think about what your target customers are going to want on a scale that will support your cooperative, right? So you need to think about the key problem. What is it that your customers are not getting from other entities that your co-op can solve for them, right? What are they dissatisfied out there with the other, options for your product or service, right? Um, and then from those questions, you can really define well what your product or service will do and how it's unique, and find your market fit in a way that will sustain your cooperative. And this is similar to other business startups, but you have the other mission of the worker cooperative, of the community in mind. And then you want to be thinking about what's your best legal entity, right? You want to ask important questions like, um, what is membership? What is your membership structure? How do people join as members? What are their rights as members? Uh, there's a whole list of questions that are good to discuss with your group, and have a good idea about how you'll be functioning and what membership powers you want, and if you'll have a board or not. And then you talk to a lawyer or a legal service um, in your area, in your state especially, and they'll help you figure out whether a cooperative corporation, an employee cooperative corporation, a worker cooperative, if your state has that statute, or an LLC will work. An LLC might be nice and flexible for what you're trying to do, but a corporation might be better if you're trying to raise capital for shares, by selling shares that are non-voting in your cooperative, for example. So we'll be getting into that a little bit more. But how, what's the cost to join? How will the profits work? How will you do the profit sharing? Will we need the outside investors? Those are some questions you want to nail down early on so that you can talk to a lawyer and find the right legal structure for your cooperative. Um, and again, this business oriented person might be the one taking a lot of that work. Um, so diving a little deeper into how you get your startup capital, right? It's really important for businesses, even if you're starting a very small operation, to be sufficiently capitalized. It's one of the top reasons that small businesses in general, not just cooperatives, don't make it, because they didn't plan sufficient capital raising to get their business off the ground. So the good news is that there are some great lenders in the cooperative arena that understand co-ops, that won't require credit scores from your members. They won't require people to put up their own, house or car as collateral. That will really understand your cooperative business plan and lend based on the value that you've put into that business plan. Shared Capital Cooperative is one that is a co-op itself and lends to co-ops. Co-op Fund in New England is in the New England area. Seed Commons is lending in lots of BIPOC communities around the country. That's connected to the working world. So there's lots of great options to get a loan if that's the right model for you. But a lot of co-ops also rely mostly on the member equity that they generate from their membership. They set a buy-in for the co-op, and they can set that pretty high, and people can finance that over time, or they set that at a place that's a significant contribution for someone. And you also could think about getting other equity investment, but not equity investment like an angel investor that wants to come in and then control how you work your co-op for the first 3 years. It's more an investor that has patient capital, that's willing to invest and not require a lot of decision making, that really understand and respect the cooperative model, that the members are the ones who make decision making power, that have the decision making power in a cooperative. But those people exist, and if you have a vision that you can really share, there's people that will want to invest, and mechanisms that you can set up to get those kind of investments. You have to be very careful whenever you're getting investments and promising a return. There are security laws that are very stringent and have huge penalties. So before you do that, you want to talk to an attorney, but there are ways to do that, and co-ops have raised significant capital to make $1 million greenhouses and huge expansions of businesses uh, through those kind of selling non-voting shares in their company. And it's best practice to not let a founding member charge it all to their personal card. You want to collectivize the risk as much as you can. So you find that legal entity and you share that risk as much as you can. A loan from a cooperative enterprise entity, like I mentioned, is a good way to go if you think you can build a business plan to pay off that loan. So, and if you talk to those lenders, they know co-ops really well and can help you with your business plan and your financial projections. They see these, every week they see multiple cooperative business plans and can give you that feedback. And a lot of them have technical assistance capacity too, and have reasonable rates. So remember to think within the co-op movement, because if you're paying any interest on those loans, it'd be great for it to go back into the cooperative movement, and other co-ops can then get those funds in the future. There are also lots of creative ways to raise capital: crowdfunding, bartering, pre-selling your product or service, right? But remember to try to do that as much as collectively as possible. So then, this business person will also be thinking about the governance and management of your cooperative. You'll be thinking about, are you going to have a board? What will be the roles and powers of that board? How will they be elected, or how will they be accountable? And what's your steering committee, figuring out in terms of a vision, and then implementing who, is there a smaller group that is in charge of implementing that, and overseeing the rest of the folks who are working there. So is there a management structure, or are you working on a collective basis? And if so, what are your structures to hold each other accountable and do evaluations and have support for each other? A cooperative can have a very horizontal governance structure, meaning everyone really has a say in the long-term vision and how the profits are distributed and setting the yearly budget, but then empower a manager to really think about the day-to-day and to have more say. Or you can have collective management too. There's lots of different structures you can take, and you can think about it creatively. One common one, though, is to elect a board, and for the board to oversee the workers, to oversee the management, and for the management to oversee the workers. But you can have other ways too. You can have committee-based systems. You can have a sociocratic or a holocratic kind of system where you empower groups, and have fluidity between those teams. But whatever it is, have a good structured discussion in your group, and make sure it's clear and on paper and written into your bylaws or operating agreement. And that's a big part of the work, and something that the Federation can help you get started with, or a co-op developer in your area. It's good to talk to them about those governance questions. Yes, and the National Cooperative Bank also lends for larger cooperative enterprises. So we've talked about the co-op capacity development person, the internal team building kind of person. We've talked about the business development person, who thinks about governance structures and legal entities and value and the product and service. And then you might want one or more people on your team that focus on the ecosystem development, right? The third arena that we're talking about today. This is someone who really creates the conditions around you to thrive. And we can talk about the technical assistance that you might need. What social movements are you connected to? What are the commitments that you're looking to get from your customers? Um, and then what are the local governments that we can pressure to support us as well? So getting technical assistance is a key component for this networking person, right? Um, so again, you might have a lot of great skills on your team, but you may not have everything you need to get going, and no one is expert in everything. So co-op developers have really shown to be the best to help you through a lot of those democratic processes that we were talking about, the governance and management. So if you have someone in your area that can help you on the co-op developer end, there are organizations in a lot of places um, that it'd be great to try to connect with those kind of organizations. Um, there's a lot of business support. So maybe on the non-cooperative specific stuff, which is a big portion of that, um, you know, there are free business supports that that can be good for any small business and for your worker cooperative. So small business development centers or university programs or groups of students that can support your co-op as well. Um, and we have a directory of service providers. So to help you find those technical assistance providers in your area, you can go to usworker.coop/service-provider-directory and check that out. We'll be updating that in a few months too. But think about who are the developers you need, where, when are you ready to speak to a lawyer, a bookkeeper, or an accountant? There are bookkeepers and accountants that are specifically uh, invested in the cooperative model and have learned how to support startups in that arena. Um, and then the co-op clinic here at the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. Again, if you're participating today, you're eligible for a free half-an-hour consultation, and we can connect you or set you up with a peer advisor to help in this arena too. So this person, this third arena, person in your team, people in your team are thinking about what other resources can we get for our co-op. And then it's also important to connect to social movements. If you're not already, embedded or come from a social movement background, think about, in your area of interest or product or service, what social movements are around you. How can you be a catalyst of change for your community? And how does your vision overlap with those that are also working for justice in your area or in your sector? And so if that's part of your mission, right, is to have this social justice component, how do you make sure to hire uh, uh, with that in mind so that that mission maintains itself? It's a very challenging thing, um, but keep that in mind as a key component. And then as you're making promises for social change, make sure you live up to those. Some examples of co-ops who are very connected to social movements and are doing this well are Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi, who have started some worker cooperatives that are very connected to Black, Indigenous movements, that area. And New Era Windows Cooperative, based in a movement of worker power and union power. And they converted their windows and door company into a cooperative to maintain their own jobs and to improve the working conditions in that sector and are active in their union. Design Action Collective is another union co-op, and they have designed a lot of the movement artwork and graphic design work for social movement. So those are three examples of ways of connecting within your membership or in the work that you do. There are many others. And the US Federation is here to help you connect around that too. So we have councils that are specifically about racial and economic justice, about policy and advocacy. So building the policy around you that can support cooperatives, Movimiento de Inmigrantes and Cooperativas. So the immigrant cooperatives that are working in lots of places and is one of the fastest growing sectors in the worker co-op movement. And then we have the Union Co-ops Council, which is a good place to connect with folks who are interested in union models. So sometimes that seems counterintuitive. If you're worker owned, why do you also need to be affiliated with a union? Well, it can be an additional protection for workers. Collective bargaining can still happen to a certain degree. It's more of a partnership, but it still exists in a cooperative setting. And unions have resources and experience. They may have processes for grievances and benefits, health insurance and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of benefits to you as a cooperative to consider engaging with unions. And several unions have it as a mission to engage with the cooperative movement. And once you're involved in a union, you can have an impact in your industry and have larger organizing power for advocacy work. So there's a lot of great examples of this happening in Cincinnati and in New York City and lots of different places. One Worker, One Vote is a great example. Co-op Cincy, lots of different places are taking this model. So then there's the community engagement and outreach, right? So getting commitment from your customers, from your community. That could be in the form of pre-sales, or you can do fundraisers. You can get larger contracts from anchor institutions like hospitals or universities in your area to have a more solid purchasing base, and other institutions that buy into your business model and what you're offering. And there's other ways of doing surveys and forums and events that can engage folks through social media, through online events, through in-person events when we can do those things again soon. And it's really important to be building that traction with your community, with your potential customers as you get going. So that third person again is really thinking about the community engagement components and getting the resources you need. Another thing this third kind of outward reaching person can be thinking about is government contracts or government resources to help you get going, workforce development initiatives, see if there's geographic incentives. Maybe then in your neighborhood, they're trying to spur economic development in some way, and you can use that in a way that really benefits your community and engaging that into your cooperative. You can become a preferred vendor for your city or your state by filling out additional paperwork and being a licensed vendor for that work. So thinking about if there's way to engage with governments as well. So again, thinking about your team, where you already have strength in your team, or if it's just you at this point, where do you have strengths and where do you want to building that team? Where, what areas do you want to build in new members that have strengths in these areas? So it can be almost like hiring, folks into your co-op, even if you're not functioning yet, but you really get to know what they have to contribute, how they work in a team setting as you build that core group, that trust and that shared vision and skills that complement each other is really important. That makeup of your founding group is really essential and something that we're focusing a lot on in this presentation. So think about where have you already started, where do you already have some capacity, and then where do you need to find other support to build. So maybe you have a team and none of you have experience in one of those arenas that we talked about. So where do you get support and educate yourselves for that? And think again in your role, okay, this person is good at group processes. Maybe they're going to be the cooperative capacity person. This person likes spreadsheets and financial projections. They're maybe the business development person. And this person is good at organizing and mobilizing allies and coalition building. They might be the ecosystem development person. Or you may have different configurations and overlap, but have clear roles as you get going. And think about how you assign your tasks too. You know, as these things come up, okay, does this person have that kind of startup job position, right? Is this person going to be taking on the decision-making process stuff and the hiring processes and things like that? And the business development person, is that the person who's going to be, you know, exploring the legal dynamics and the products and the licenses you need for your components, things like that? And the community person, is that person already doing some marketing and some market testing and some customer service work and building those alliances? So we're going to be going into a discussion soon. So start thinking about your questions. You can put them in the chat, or we'll be having, you know, the ability to unmute and have a discussion. So think about those, and we really encourage, you know, questions that apply to the whole group as much as possible. So the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, we're the only grassroots entity that's representing and organizing within the worker co-op arena. We also have advocacy work, and we have lots of local chapters. So places that are established and have multiple worker cooperatives then form and kind of a local chapter and engage with the federation in that way. And we also have great benefits for co-ops, from startups to existing co-ops, that they can get technical assistance at lower rates and some free technical assistance. They can get health related benefits. So there's great vision and dental plans, for example, but lots of other health related benefits. So if you can't, you know, get that kind of good purchasing power as a small cooperative, you can join the federation and get access to some of those. I mentioned the peer networks and member councils. Again, there's peer networks. So if you're in a farm cooperative, there's a whole group of people starting farm worker cooperatives around the country, and you can engage with them on a listserv. If you're a tech cooperative and you're looking for how do you do this in the tech arena, there's a group that meets regularly in the tech, you know, that are made up of tech co-ops. And there's a bunch of other ones, or if there isn't, then you can get involved and start one if you think there's enough interest. And you can also be involved in policy. And if you want to do policy work in your area, you can leverage the national, you know, resources of the federation to do that kind of advocacy work. So you can start with the startup membership, or if you're a conversion membership, and it's a yearly thing, and you can plug in, and we have events and lots of ways to engage on a national level. I just want to leave you with a few online resources too. We'll be sending a bunch more out in an email following this up, along with these slides. We'll be sending those out. But a great place for legal questions is cooplaw.org, or the selc.org, the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Especially if you're in California, there's a plethora of information about co-ops and legal stuff, or self-directed, worker-directed nonprofits. They have a lot of great resources on that. Democracy at Work Institute is our sister organization here on the national level that generates a lot of great resources. They just came out with a democratic management guide that is excellent and free, and it's right there on institute.coop. You can download it there. So many great tools and worksheets and explanations of how, you know, real democracy can happen within your cooperative. So definitely check that out. It's a great free resource that just came out a few weeks ago. And then we have a lot on our website, usworker.coop. So those are just a few, and from there you can launch into lots of different online resources. And we have, you know, some upcoming events we just want to let you know about. The Policy Council, right? The Co-op Policy Pulse. You can listen in and hear what's going on in the policy arena. That's coming up. That happens regularly. And then this webinar is monthly. So if you know other folks that would like to attend, please spread the word. And then we have a spring meeting where, you know, a chance to see the kind of the movement come together in a membership meeting, and hold the date if you are a member or considering to be a member. That's on May 26th at 3 p.m. Eastern. 12 Pacific. So, get involved. And if you want us to support our work as a monthly sustainer, that's a great way to do it too. You can sign up at usworker.coop as well. Um, and yeah, thank you for participating today. We're going to open it up for lots of discussion, question, answer, um, and uh, and we hope you got something out of this. I'm going to stop my share so we can see each other a little bit better. Feel free to put your questions either in the chat or unmute yourself um, and share your question. Again, I encourage questions that might be applicable to others as well, as much as possible. There's a question about the founder members, losses. Yeah, so it's common in like a normal startup, the founders often run a loss, and that's part of the risk they take, right? They take personal loss in the short term, and in the long term, there's some upside, if they're successful. You can set up systems like that for worker cooperatives too. You can have founder sweat equity or actual financial uh, cash injections that the founders have given. You can set up the compensation for that early on, and usually you base it on year 3 or 4 when the co-op is projecting to be profitable. That's when the compensation usually comes in. But if there's a lot of value or services or actual equipment that founders are giving early on, you can collectivize that risk and buy it from founders, or by taking a loan. And there's lots of ways of setting up that founder compensation. There's employment contracts and things like that. But yeah, that's a good thing to work through with a developer, and then eventually a lawyer if you can. Um, but yeah, it is important to compensate those founders uh, because they've taken on a bulk of the risk, and there's some great resources of how to do that successfully. Template bylaws and operating agreements, cooplaw.org or theselc.org, the SELC.org have great templates, especially if you're in California. Um, and then institute.coop also has some good templates. The ICA model bylaws are good bylaws for cooperative corporations, especially in Massachusetts, but elsewhere too. So ICA group has those available. Those are some of the places to start, but you really want to have a conversation with a co-op developer if possible, and they'll help you find the right operating agreement or bylaws that suits your co-op as a starting place, and then you can adapt it to fit. A typical incorporation process, how long does that take? It doesn't necessarily vary too much by state. That component of actually filing with the state and hearing back isn't a long process. It's really finding the right entity that takes longer, making sure you're filling out the form correctly, because that can then delay things. If you have something in your filing, your articles of incorporation or organization that raise a red flag, then you may need to go back and forth. But usually the actual process of incorporation with the state is not a super long process. I've had it happen, the next day for an LLC, or a week for a corporation. I would say it's generally less than a few weeks, but it really is about getting your documents in order. Your articles of organization or incorporation, say what type of entity you're starting. If you have stocks that you're going to have in your company, those kind of things are stated. Who are the founding members are stated in those articles. That's a public document that goes on the Secretary of State website. Then your bylaws or operating agreements is your internal document. This is that'll say how you make decisions, what powers members have, what if you have a board, what powers the board has, what happens in times of conflict or removal of a member, all that kind of stuff. You don't need to have that publicly available, though the IRS may need to look at it to know how to tax you, or a co-op developer or lender might want to look at it to make sure you have your democratic processes in place. Yeah, if you're a worker cooperative corporation or a cooperative corporation, the employees are, your worker owners are technically employees. If you can set up as an LLC partnership, and then the worker owners are not considered considered employees, they're considered owners, and they're compensated as owners, and they pay taxes as owners, and they follow employment law as owners. So if you have people that use ITINs instead of social security numbers, or don't have social security numbers, you may want to look into the LLC co-op model as a partnership. There's other considerations. You'll definitely want to talk to a lawyer about that. But yes, if you can't, for example, pay workers' compensation in the very beginning, it's not a best practice. You should, as much as possible, pay those kind of things. But if there is a specific reason why you can't follow employment law, you may want to think about starting as an LLC. It is a little bit easier to go from being taxed as a partnership in an LLC to being taxed as a corporation, and vice versa. But those are things you definitely want to talk to a lawyer or an accountant about. For some of these longer questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask them, uh, you know, directly.
This is James. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it common to use more than one when raising capital? Is it common or less common to use more than one fund when trying to raise capital for your business? Like you'd listed, like the Seed Commons, the New England Cooperative Fund. Is it typical to stick with one, or?
Yeah, usually you start with one. If you're looking for a loan, you'd want to start with one lender that's in your area or is the best fit. And if they're not comfortable, carrying the full title, then you can bring in a second lender and see how to work it out. One might be, a secondary lender, might be in a secondary position, for example, and the primary would have to be comfortable with that. Though, those kind of dynamics. But as much as possible, for simplification and not to have to fill out 2 loan applications, go to one and ask for what you need, and work with them to make the numbers work so that they're comfortable and you're comfortable, to make sure you can make those, regular payments to pay back the loan. But first, think about what you can generate on your own from your own community, from your own members. But beyond that, yeah, a lot of people need a loan to get going. Or you can even get a loan for pre-development work. It's going to take you a year, and you need to compensate yourselves in the startup phase, and you're very comfortable with your business idea that it will generate enough to pay off even that pre-development fund, so you can take on a loan for that. Even some of the lenders do take that on. So yeah, start with one, but it's very common for there to be at least more than one source of capital, be it your membership equity and a loan, or membership equity and outside investors, or some sort of crowdfunding or pre-sales, things like that. It's common to need to raise, from multiple sources. Yeah, there are great cooperative corporation statutes in certain states. New York State is mentioned here in the chat. That's based on the Mondragon model. Mondragon is the largest worker co-op in the world. It's based in Basque area of Spain, and they are in lots of different industrial sectors and have a university and banks and a whole co-op ecosystem that they built over the years. They're a great model to look into for inspiration in terms of scale and diversification. So yeah, they've inspired a lot of these state statutes for cooperative corporations, or employee cooperative corporations, worker cooperative statutes. Not all states have them, but you can find something in your state that'll work for you. Marketing agencies, yeah, there are some. If you look on the US Federation website, usworker.coop, and you search the membership, there are agencies there that are good at marketing. Samara Collective is one, is a co-op, worker co-op in Boston that does it. There, Design Action is another one that I had mentioned earlier that does design and marketing work. There's a lot of great co-ops that get the movement, the mission, the worker co-op model, and can help you with marketing components, and understand, solidarity economy, new economy work. And let's see, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
I had a kind of a specific question about structure. I was the one who put in the question about the C corporations.
I didn't see that. If you could explain it, please.
Sure. Well, just I wanted to see if there was any. There's a team here starting to start a co-op that wanted to attract investment dollars. So the idea was to have an umbrella S corporation, and then the worker cooperative organizes a C corporation underneath. Does this sound terrible?
That sounds like a very specific thing you'd want to take to a lawyer or a legal cafe. The CELC runs these free legal cafes. You can find them on their website too, to bring that kind of question. It's not unheard of for a cooperative to use the C corporation for that specific purpose, to raise investment dollars. That is a common practice. But also cooperative corporation statutes also allow that in a lot of states. And in some states, there are investor classes you can have in your co-op too, if that's of interest. S corporations are tricky because it's a pass-through kind of taxation. That I can't speak to directly. That would be a tax specialist or an attorney to help you with that. But I know that, yes, C corporations, cooperative corporations, those are set up better for the kind of outside investor classes. Yeah. Flexibility of worker co-ops to start as a C corporation around adding and removing members. I don't know if there's more flexibility with that statute than other statutes. I don't really understand the question. Someone wants to speak more to that, but you set in your bylaws or operating agreements the process for adding and removing members, right? So, yes, the statute may have specific requirements, but most of them are flexible enough for you to have the right kind of onboarding and removal processes that will fit your cooperative.
I guess the contrast would be like a multi-member LLC, when there have to be restructuring of the business entity if you removed a member owner who was part of a multi-member LLC.
Possibly. It depends, again, if you're a partnership or being taxed as a corporation. But there may, there may be benefits. This is kind of an area that's probably pretty specific to each cooperative and the desires you want. So as much as you can outline, the best way to do it, we've found with these kind of legal situations, is really outline, this is the way we want it to work, right? This is why we want cooperative members to have these kind of opportunities. This is the kind of membership onboarding structure we want. This is the kind of tax thing we want to be careful on. And then you go to the accountants and the lawyers, and they will help you find the right structure or a way within the structure that's available in your state to make that do it, or to make that happen, or as close as possible. If you do this back and forth, like what's possible under this statute, and do we want it to work that way, and that back and forth can really get confusing, and you can get stuck in the weeds. But if you outline, like, this is how we want it to do, hey lawyer, help us get there, we found that that's more effective. But I imagine a lot of you are in the team building phase, right? So are there any questions around that team building work, like building up your initial team or steering committee or or founding board, or thoughts that came up during that part of the discussion that you wanted to share, experiences that might be useful to share with others. Samantha, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for answering my question earlier about how many members, because we are in the kind of idea stage, and we have had meetings with interested people in the immigrant community that we're working with. But I'm seeing now, after hearing you talk about the specific roles and the people that the skills and everything that we need, that it may not be the best idea to start with just anyone that's interested in the immigrant community. And I'm not really sure, because it's kind of tricky. This is the group of people that I want to be involved, but I'm not, they don't, I know that many of them don't have the skills that you're talking about. So,
Well, you'd be surprised, especially a lot of immigrants from Central South America have cooperative experience in their home country, and and it might be different here, but bring a lot of, a wealth of knowledge on co-ops and cooperation that could be really useful to your founding team. And if that's who you envision being, accountable to in the long run, it's really important to engage them early. Um, if you're worried about, language considerations, there's a whole bunch of language, justice cooperatives around that are there with tools, and you can engage them to help you navigate language. If it's training, there's also so many great immigrant training organizations around the country. Prospera in the Bay Area does trainings for immigrant leaders around the country. So there's a lot of great resources specifically for that community in New York City, but not just in New York, but like, trainings that are available from the New York City network of worker cooperatives that immigrant leaders can be part of. So I would encourage you to engage those folks as early as possible. So it's not an existentialist kind of build it and then, pass it off to a different community, that it's built with the community as much as possible. I know there's other considerations, but
I mean, it's a group idea, and well, it's my idea to address the issue of there being no work for the group immigrant farm labor workers from Central America. But the group that we have so far, there's about 12, and they have garment factory experience, but not the experience with the cooperatives. That's something that we're having to educate ourselves. Everyone, all of us, me too, educate ourselves. And so thank you for the idea of training, because I think that would be helpful to all of us. So.
Yeah, and we will be running this webinar in Spanish at least twice this year. So look out on the website. We haven't set the dates for that yet. And Democracy at Work Institute and others have done a lot of translation of the materials for worker co-op startups, and those are available for free online. So there's a lot of great resources for and by the immigrant community.
Great, thank you.
I have a question about building up membership for the co-op. So my friend Eric and I are planning to open a cooperative yoga and fitness studio. So far it's just us two, and my friend Tyler is a lawyer, which is kind of helping us with our legal questions. But my question is, how much of the structure of the co-op, like bylaws, do we need to establish ourselves if we're considering bringing on teachers who we might have like in a probation period teaching for us before inviting them as full members? I guess because we're still looking for other people who have like the time to invest in a cooperative like this, but in the meantime we're going to start teaching ourselves. So and bringing on people, I guess, one or at a time or as we find them, how can we or I guess what should we have in place now versus how we can include them as they come on to deciding the structure of the co-op? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's no one specific route to the, the or order of operations, but people have found that you form your kind of core group and steering committee. You set as many of the larger operating procedures in an operating agreement or bylaws, as you're figuring out the right legal entity, and really ensuring that your business model, so doing business model canvas exercises, writing a business plan, all of those really should have some progress to them before you incorporate. Then as you incorporate, you should pretty soon, right there or soon thereafter, have your bylaws, even if they're initial bylaws that you can then change and amend as you go forward, but ones that will work for you in the short term and the long term as much as possible. Have those in place, and then a lot of the other policies of hiring, grievances, a lot of those things, you'll need to build up as you grow. But yeah, I'd say, if you're able to at least be really clear about your trial period, what that looks like, how long it is, if you have one or not, what your membership fee is going to be, if that's refundable or not. Some of those main key questions before you onboard the next tier of teachers in your example. I don't know if that answered the question, or there was something
That does,
else.
thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
How can we go about, so I'm talking with one of the other worker owners right now. They weren't able to attend. So I've recommended that they come to a future webinar, but how can we schedule the 30-minute consultation that you talked about?
Yeah, you go to usworker.coop, and then you go in programs, you go to co-op clinic, and right there's request a consultation or request support or get support or something. And then it's a short form. And right after you fill out that form, you'll see my Calendly, and you can book a consult. And then, yeah, we just set it up, and we find resources that are specific to your, situation and where you're at. And, if we can find, we do have grants available for people in rural areas, so we can actually fund the technical assistance oftentimes. Or if you're in New York or a few other places, we can find those resources to help, get the support. Or we may refer you to another organization in your area that does co-op development that might have some resources behind it. And we may pair you up with a peer advisor, someone who's worked in a co-op, has the experience in the area that you're looking for support in, and they come on as an advisor. So you can book that right at usworker.coop and find the co-op clinic link and just book it. Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. Also, your cat has a lot to say.
I think it's a little kid probably.
Oh, okay. Very similar sounds, but awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you
Yeah.
doing this.
Any other questions?
It looks like Addison has a question in the chat that might be helpful. I'm not sure if you've already kind of answered it or not.
Addison is from Worcester, and that's where I've been doing my organizing, so I'm sure they're familiar with what they're asking there. I think it's kind of a rhetorical question, but yeah. Yeah, so in Worcester, we have a small but great group of co-ops that came together to support each other and then affiliate with the Federation of Worker Cooperatives. So that's a really important component and one of the principles of of cooperatives is principle 6 is cooperation amongst cooperatives. So as much as you can connect to other co-ops in your area or in your sector and find how you can support each other, that would be great. You know, that's really helpful. And you'd be surprised, like co-ops are really eager to, you know, to share their, you know, detailed business models. So if you're looking to do like market research, reach out to another co-op that, you know, is in your sector or offering similar product or service, and you'd be surprised with what they're willing to share. Even if, you know, someone might consider you a competitor, you know, in cooperative world, you know, there is this idea of cooperation a lot more, and they might be really willing to share a lot of that, you know, their market experience or their, you know, product feedback and those kind of things. So yeah. Courtney, I have a little hard time hearing you. If you can try to speak up louder. Yeah.
Is that a little better?
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it would be possible to have access to the slides that you used today, if you all are giving those out. We have, we're from Oklahoma. We're kind of the only worker co-op in our area right now, but we're starting to get more people who are interested. We don't really have like resources for showing them kind of steps, you know, besides just sharing what we've done, which we're happy to do, but it would be cool to have some kind of resource like what you went through today to provide for people.
Yeah, both the slides and a recording will be sent out after this. Feel free to share it, along with lots of other resources. There are some great guides out there for startups that can help you walk through a lot of these components. We'll be sharing some of those. And, you know, if you decide to join the Federation, then, you know, we have staff that can help you connect to other folks in your arena or specific questions, or, you know, to other co-ops who have done it, you know, done similar processes that you've worked on. So yes, everything from today will be shared in an email, probably Monday.
Awesome, thank you.
Team building. We talked about that quite a bit earlier in the presentation. So, you know, there's a component of working together, building a shared vision that is builds teamwork amongst your co-op, or you know, getting to know each other's experiences, identities, the way they appreciate communication or don't appreciate communication. That's a big thing. You know, having a conflict mediation process that really works for your cooperative is really key. And then being dedicated to follow that when you when conflict does come up, because it comes up in lots of places, but in cooperatives as well. And so having clear, you know, roles and structures, but also having having a process to work through conflict. And one thing is really having clear communication guidelines and prevention of conflict is something that has been shown to be really important. So how does each person like to be communicated to? How does, you know, what are having clear roles and accountability structures? Any other questions or comments or things people want to share, especially around the, you know, building your initial team, around moving from the idea into a real place where you're ready to start a cooperative enterprise?
This is James again. I have a
You're breaking up, James. If you can try one more time.
okay. Is there a process that you use to make sure people really want to be like in a co-op? Like if they're unsure of like how much work it takes, or if you're just trying to, I don't know, make sure that everybody knows, I don't know, what they're getting into. Like, is there a way to do that?
That would be great if there were some specific activity to do that. I don't know of one, except that it is a best practice to have your rights and responsibilities really clearly written out, so that people are not just getting hired for a job, but they're becoming a member owner of something that's larger, that's a larger commitment than just an employment kind of situation. So stressing that, doing workshops that talk about, the rights and responsibilities. There are some great activities for that in the democratic management guide that I mentioned that Dowie just came out with. So institute.coop, and find the guide. And there's some great activities right there that, they have agendas for those kind of, meetings specifically to talk about roles, responsibilities. And that can be done, in consideration as you do hiring, or as you do your initial team development. Well, thank you all for participating, and yeah, feel free to share the resources that we'll be sending out by Monday. And if you feel you're at a place where you're ready to get some technical assistance on a component, whether it's working through your bylaws or doing a feasibility study, or getting connected to the right lawyer, or setting up your onboarding processes, that's something we can help at Co-op Clinic. So go to usworker.coop, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.